We're not married. I'm married to someone else. So welcome everyone, thank you for coming along. And we've got this talk that's called Health is Hard. It's actually something of a misnomer because we had a very set idea of what this talk would be about. We did a few rehearsals, got some feedback, and it turned out to be something completely different. So I do apologize, but it's not Health is Hard. It is Culture is Hard. Probably to nobody here's surprise. Health is hard, so is finance, so is defense. If you're B2B, B2C, every other industry that uses technology to make people's lives better, it's all hard in various different ways, and sort of to say that health is harder than any particular other industry was probably not the approach you want to take here. Really, culture is hard. So let's find out why. So a little bit about ourselves. My name is Alex, this is Troy. We come from very similar but also very different backgrounds. We both spent time at Spark Ventures. That was our first technology jobs. We were interns there through the Summer of Tech program. Little plug, it's amazing. You should do it. Or not do it, but hire people from it. Prior to that, I was in the Army for a little bit of time, and Troy worked at a place called Active Mobile Security, dealing with Android security issues, which is a growth industry, as per always. Meanwhile, I was bitterly complaining about walking up hills and the general state of things, as soldiers tend to do. This is double-clicking.
Cool. So we got to HealthLink, we came in, we started looking at the development side because we were developers. And we came in, everything was on Windows VMs, running Tomcat, Java, Camel, Service Mix, JBoss, pretty much every Java tool you could find we had somewhere. Which was fine until we looked closer and we found everything was out of date, poorly managed, and yeah. So another thing was these deployments were also pretty crappy. You wrote a long text document as you wrote your application. You then zipped it all up and threw it across the wall over to someone else. Then we would then go and decipher these cryptic instructions, get it all tested, maybe make some changes to these instructions ourselves, and then we would have that thrown over to operations, who would then do the exact same process, a couple different environments, and then hopefully that would be in production shortly. These manual processes were very scary to us because we come from Ventures, which was a very automated, high startup-like environment, and it was scary seeing that there was always room for error, human error. So we eventually got on, and we created a team. We created a team called DevStar. We wanted to come in, obliterate all these bad processes which we were seeing. We wanted to fix up the dev side of the house. We wanted to help them write better code, help them do different things. But for this talk, we're only going to talk about the continuous delivery side of it. We came up with some requirements which we thought we wanted to have for our continuous delivery tooling. These are all pretty basic. One thing being familiarity, so that everyone wasn't going to be scared of these new toolings, which we were going to push onto them. This was our stack, which we decided on. It's pretty basic. Everyone here would have been able to do it if they wanted to, but
Sorry for you, buddy.
Yeah. But we found that it was too familiar and we weren't getting buy-in. So everyone was either too busy, didn't care, we were already kind of doing it and already had it dealt with. So we didn't get buy-in, but our management still really wanted these processes. And because of that, we got out of nowhere, we got reprioritized and put onto just doing the continuous integration and delivery side of it.
So one of our directors challenged us on this. He said, deployments take too long. We've got this problem with time to market. We can't move as fast as our competitors. He wanted us to make deployments and changes as quickly as possible. The example that he gave to us was that we've got this client who use this web form and they want to change some wording. The most basic change you can think of, just a text change, maybe a little JavaScript change, something really simple that should just be really easy, right? At the time, it took us 5 minutes to make a fix. Not a problem. It took us 2 weeks to regression test that fix. It took another 2 weeks for operations teams to set up, monitor, schedule the release into a maintenance window, and get it done. He says to us, he says, I want that 4 weeks of my life back. I want you to do it in 4 minutes instead. At the time, we had this big master plan of all of these things that we wanted to do to our dev shop to make things better, to make things faster and easier and less upsetting. And we were a little bit salty about that because we're getting pulled off this thing that we want to do onto something else. There was a dissonance there, but in hindsight, really what we got put onto was the Holy Grail. So in addition to all of the other great things that we wanted, we had to go fast. We had to go as fast as we possibly could, and it was at this stage that we started to think about, how do you go fast? How do you do these things? We reviewed the stack that we came up with. We realized that, who here deploys application code with their configuration management tool? Anybody? Yep, a few people. How comfortable are you running your configuration management tool every 40 seconds, every 30 seconds? How long does it take that application configuration management tool to deploy your code? Our Puppet runs were about 12 minutes. We weren't going to do it in 4. So that's the first issue that we had. Puppet's a great tool, but in this case, we weren't using it in the way that would enable us to meet those timelines. We're not super sad about that. It's kind of an anti-pattern for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. We try and avoid it where we can. Your immutable infrastructure slowly creeps down the pub to drown its sorrows, which is not what we wanted to do. That was for the developers. So, sad one, Puppet, you're not gone completely. We are using you for other things. It's not a breakup. We knew about these things called containers. They're pretty cool. We knew we could go fast with containers, but that means no Windows, right? Because at this point, you can't have Docker on Windows. Just the other day you can. Still not too sad about that. But it means that we can't do the things that we want to do. And sort of the chief conflict that we set up with this is that we're a Windows shop. So these new requirements kind of invalidated our entire stack and forced us to rethink what we were doing. So it's something of an adjustment. Using the tools on the slide here, this is the stuff that we did to enable us to meet those time constraints. Puppet gets shifted down to purely deal with provisioning VMs into a state where we can use them, where we know what they are. A big problem that we have is that our dev environment's different to QA, different to pre-pro, all the other things, which is why I get deployments halfway through the pipeline that fail for no good reason. Windows goes the way of the wallabies in favor of Ubuntu. We toyed with the idea of Red Hat, but the costs outweigh the benefits, so Ubuntu it is. Rancher with Cattle deals to our container management, orchestration, and scheduling, obviously sitting on top of Docker. Fortunately for some people, VMware stays where it is because health and cloud, it's kind of like we'd love to use AWS, but there's privacy issues, it's a nightmare. But even now, as a result of this, we're starting to get people think about, okay, what about Ubuntu and KVM? What about OpenStack or other ways of getting rid of VMware? VMware has just recently been bought by Dell, so there you go. So we spent the next slice of time implementing the solution, validating that we could do what we said we could do, while ensuring that our business people, sponsors, delivery team, all these people were happy. And they were happy. They were very, very happy. We smashed the target. We go from one environment to the next in 2 minutes. Happy days, we can get all the way to production. In theory, it's all good. But this talk isn't about technology. This talk is about people.
Cool. So we found that we had nailed the technology side, but in reality, we had really let the people side slip. Cool. So we were a Windows shop. When we first asked for a Linux VM, it was quite an experience. I submitted a request just like I had for all my other Windows VMs I'd requested, but instead of a regular response, it came back with a, I'll have to check with that. Like, are you allowed to do that? It actually got emailed around the company all the way up to our board of directors to see if I could actually just run a Linux VM in our environment. Eventually, they couldn't come up with a reason of why I couldn't, so I got that in the end. But just asking for something so outside of their normal zone it just caused so much fear for them, and it just put them right on edge. And this was a warning sign we should have picked up from and worked with at the start, but we didn't. So yeah, we just carried on, we kept going, we kept working towards this goal of Linux VMs and continuous everything. Cool. So next thing we thought was, okay, we actually maybe should get them working with this stuff a little bit. So like, cool, here's this VM, here's Rancher. Cool, you can now put a Java application on it and go and have a play with it and see how you guys feel with it. We thought it'd be easier, we thought it'd be like giving them a little training bar and going on. But in reality, it was like we were trying to teach water skiing, and they were running doing a skiing race, and yeah. This left them quite hurt, and they were not really willing to try with it because they got burnt quite badly. We had a massive issue with an outdated version of VMware where our virtual switches wouldn't work within an environment. We could talk outside, but we couldn't talk to two VMs in the same environment because of it. It was, yeah, so many similarities, but not enough. And so this was another big warning sign we should have picked up on. Like, they just got burnt quite badly, but we just decided to carry on. We were pushing all these things. It was like automation, Linux, Papa, Docker, and we were wrapping it up, trying to deliver it to them, but to them it was like we were just packaging up a pile of poop, putting it on the desks, dealing with them. If they had been the ones who were pulling instead of us pushing, it probably would have been a lot different story. But yeah, and also someone else, we were asked what would help us go quicker. We said if we could grab one of their team and put them in our team and have us working with them a lot more, it would be a lot better for everyone. And they took this as they want to dissolve our team, move them all onto all our teams, and not have an operations team anymore. This was, yeah, they'd grown quite quiet. We took this as, cool, they're enjoying it, let's keep going, let's go faster. Their panicking got worse. They were thinking of leaving. They were talking to their managers. They ended up talking to their managers, talked to our managers. We ended up having a blackout where we weren't allowed to talk to them for 4 weeks. That probably should have been our last warning sign where we should have stopped. But we carried on. Yeah, this should have really been someone screaming in our faces telling us to stop. Nope. We delivered. So we were at our destination, we have this entire stack, we were deploying applications in all of the environments except for prod in 2 minutes. It was going crazy, everyone was loving it, our sponsors were loving it, and then we had our big meeting showing off it to the whole company. We were asked, how soon can we have it in production? We answered today. We probably shouldn't have. Yeah. This led to mass pancaking everywhere. We strong-armed them into a position they couldn't negotiate out of. And yeah, we really messed up that people side of it.
So for a little bit of context around what happened next, I've got this picture up there, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. If you've never heard of it, never read it, I highly recommend it. It's not that long. Behind me, it's like the food pyramid of people. Ice cream's at the top, and sort of your carbs and that, and your beer are at the bottom. So the lower down you go, the more of it you need, right? Trust is right at the bottom there. It's the foundation of everything that we do, that we interact with people. It's been mentioned earlier by some very inspiring people, and trust is critical. And we lost that trust. Ignore that. As part of the wind down from this work, as part of the process that we did an end of project retrospective. So from a technological standpoint, we had a look at it. We think what we did was top notch. We smashed the targets on time, under budget, all that good stuff. But actually thinking about the people side of it, we did that quite badly. We thought that we'd met all of their needs. We'd offered to collaborate and to work through it the whole way through. We thought we did everything right, but in between the deadlines, the new technologies, the fast pace of development, we failed to give them the context and input they wanted, and we burned them out. That resulted in the loss of a relationship with people that we trusted and valued, people that we needed to do our jobs. That resulted in a reduction in our ability to get that job done, and it almost prevented the business from deriving value from what we created. But more importantly, you know, we made these people feel left behind. That's the thing. We made these people feel like they missed the school bus for the big field trip. We made them feel like they were watching the sunset at noon. And that's not a good thing. Who could have thought, right? We're at DevOps Days. Who could have thought that empathy might be the solution to our problems? Us, as it turns out, we probably should have. We definitely should have. Hindsight is 2020. We did bring up concerns about all of these things at the time. We spotted these warning signs, but we had to do it anyway. How were we going to affect other businesses? Our heads of shed expressed confidence in our ability to deal with that disruption and our ability to manage the people side of it. We did our best, but it wasn't enough, and that's something that we are truly sorry for. After looking at the issue, one thing that became very apparent was that what we felt was enough, coming from a highly disruptive background, it wasn't enough. Containers aren't going to fix your broken culture, if your culture is broken. Putting these things into containers, getting a fancy build agent, we're on Bamboo, we're in the cloud, we've got buzzword X, Y, and Z, they quite demonstrably did not help us interact with people. Conversely, to paraphrase Conway's law, to mangle it, if I'm truthful, without changing the shape of the organization and the way that we communicate or reason with others and those structures, we would never be able to truly adjust the way that we worked with them, the way that we built software. It's not that the culture was irretrievably broken, the culture was fine. It's just that we weren't thinking about it in a reasonable manner. Language was mentioned earlier. We weren't using a shared language, a set of shared ideals. Culture at this stage was what our leaders said it should be, and one of our little taglines is certainty and care. It's an admirable ideal that we identify strongly with, but it's not something that we could use to base our interactions day to day on. We couldn't measure our behaviors by that in all cases. There were edge cases. The solution was a refresh. It was a rethink of what culture means to us as an organization of somewhat like-minded people. We, and this is very much at the stage of royal we designed a process where we could undertake research, table ideas, vote on these ideas to say, what are we going to do about this? Top-down values don't work. You get heaps of these people at the top telling you what's important, telling you the way it should be, and who are they? How do they know? What he's saying from his ivory tower is that he's not concerned about representation if he's trying to dictate the way that we feel about these things. We were very concerned with representation the entire way through, so these were values that needed to represent all of us, not just those of us who were able to spend time on frivolous, happy meetings. We split into two groups as an organization. We had a working group, a decision group. Those decision groups contained 3 people. They gave a yes or a no to things tabled to them by the working group. They only said yes or no. They couldn't make changes of any kind. It was a very binary choice. The working group was a very diverse bunch. We had representatives from all business units, a range of people from different cultural backgrounds, different genders, everything. The diversity was the key thing that I think enabled the whole initiative to work, right? We also tried to make the decision group as diverse as possible. With 3 people, it's kind of a little bit harder. The top-down directives and an absence of diversity lead to outcomes like this, outcomes that don't represent what the people in that company potentially felt. They have no bearing or influence on our day-to-day interactions with others, and these things muddle our interactions with others, actually. They reduce the clarity and predictability in how we reason about and respond to things. This is a much more basic overview about what Peter was talking about earlier. It's something that is very dear to us at HealthLink. We think that to be truly successful as knowledge workers, we need to be in teal, we need to be in green. That's not to say that you can't be successful in those other tiers, but for us at HealthLink, success for us looks like green or teal. We're 50-50 Kiwis to more worldly types. We're not the stereotypical pale male style development shop, and we have more work to do. There's always more work to do. This diversity is what led us to better outcomes like these. So we weren't building things that were being externally enforced. They were things that our people gravitated to naturally by themselves. This means that we could use them to guide our behavior day to day because these people already felt these things. It was less of a, here's our new culture, and more of a, here's a shared language for expressing what we all value already. That means that we can create feedback loops in the way that we behaved and approach problems and conflict to better resolve those conflicts. The result was these values: grow here, create with purpose, express with integrity, and be great together. This language gives us ways about reasoning about the mistakes that we made earlier with the operations teams and better communicating with the rest of the business. In defining those values, we enabled empathy to take place. Which leads us to today. So we're working closer than ever with our operations team. We have more work to do on that front, but we've proven that we're not interlopers out to spoil their tea or just drop a box of poop on their desk and walk away. We're writing it, we're supporting it, we're in this together. But what gives us the right to stand here and talk to you authoritatively like we've solved these problems? We haven't. I want to be very clear about that. We've got more work to do, but we've started. We're past having just started. In fact, I think in terms of building culture, building empathy, and building trust, we're a lot past starting. We're middle of the pack now, which is really good, because actually the hardest part is starting, and that's the one thing we need to take away from this. The hard part is starting. There you go, Troy.
Cool. So we had a number of learnings out of this, which we would say you should do if you're doing anything related to this. First one is, if you're doing change, if you're changing how someone's going to work, how they're going to do it, get a change manager. It will reduce the amount of tears. It will help everyone remove their personal feelings and politics, and actually help come to the right decisions quicker. When change management is concerned, the way you interact with people is critical, and we didn't have the skills to do that. As a result of us oversharing, we lost trust of a person who was going to help us a great deal if we were to work with him properly. And yeah, communication is a massive piece of change management, which is what we really screwed up. The other part is you can't do the technology side of change or introducing it without doing the culture side. If you drop all the technologies there, everyone's going to work around them or go back to how they're doing it or barely use the tool and not get the most out of it. You need to do the culture side, the actual how we come to getting to those tools and everything. Yeah, and so yeah, change is highly emotive, and if you forget that or try to ignore that, it will end poorly.
So this is probably more for the online version, but the references that we've spoken about here, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, the organizational types. One other book that also sort of guided our thinking on this is Turning the Ship Around. They're all really good books, and they're all actually quite short, which suits me just fine. The hardest part in this is definitely starting, but you need to. If you don't start, your competitors will, I guarantee you that, if they haven't already. If you're on the fence, don't be. Favor action rather than analysis. And the more that you break ground, the easier it gets. Change is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The trick is just guiding it down the right path, not the garden path. The more you break ground, the easier it gets. So do so responsibly, but do so. Are there any questions?
So what would you have done if your request for Linux VMs was pushed forward at executive level, but the people who have to do it in a passive-aggressive manner just never do it? No amount of culture can get you out of that. Just wondering.
No, you're right. So there's only a certain amount that you can do to push it from the top down, right? So it becomes, in terms of business outcomes versus personal outcomes, you have to treat them differently, right? When you're dealing with people, you need to be empathetic. When you're dealing with them on an individual level, you need to give them the tools and the support that they need to be successful. You have to make them want to give you that Linux VM. But from a business level, you have to be ruthless. If the business needs Linux, the business gets Linux. It's that simple. And you can't drag everyone along with you, which is where you have to work with them and empower them and provide them that ability to be successful in that new way of operating. I think the comment was made yesterday during one of the unconference style talks that this is the direction that the business is going. We will give you all the help and all the training and all the support that we can to help you go in that same direction. But if you want to go over here, then it's better for both of us if that doesn't happen. Fortunately, we haven't had anybody leave at HealthLink yet. We've managed to get people on side. It's a hard problem. It's a really hard problem. Yeah.
You're one morning tea or lunch.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks very much, Troy and Alex.